When the Buddha was asked what distinguished him from others, he said, "I am awake." The others, obviously being ourselves, immersed, if not asleep, in the thraldom of illusions. Therefore, we hope that the subject that we are going to present will aid, even ever so slightly, in awakening to our true state of being. At the end of the talks, we will open up for questions from our listeners. And please keep your mics muted during the talks. Thus, without further ado, we will now hear a talk on individuation by Jerry. Jerry, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good day, everybody. So nice to have you together. Self-actualization is the awakening of spiritual faculties within the constitution of man. It is related to the idea of self-realization when we consider the self as the source of life and light. It is connected to self-mastery when mastery refers to our vestures. It is associated with self-transcendence when the idea of self is limited and provincial. And it is allied with self-reliance when the self is a reflection of the oversoul. Self-actualization is a relatively new expression of the ancient idea of spiritual awakening. It was born out of the frustration over the focus on pathology in modern psychology. But the art and science of self-actualization has ancient roots. And because the self as an idea is almost impossible to define, it remains esoteric at its core. It is wise not to try to pin it down. The path of enlightenment is indeed an art and a science together. And independent of its newest expression in our times or any other times, it is eternally fresh and new. Abraham Maslow, like Emerson, who came a century before, was picking up the old lines laid down concerning what Theosophy calls the spiritual path. Shall we not study human excellence as much as we study human dysfunction? Maslow asked. What makes certain individuals great? What are the common traits of those who are the best amongst us? Lord knows we have spent plenty of time in the modern era studying what is wicked in human nature. It is a blood sport amongst the intelligentsia to run humanity down. And one wonders if such prognosticating becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at some point. In this lecture series, we intend to explore three ideas central to the art of self-actualization, namely individuation, inspiration, and illusion. Each one of these ideas we intend to look at from the perspective of theosophical philosophy. That is to say, we will endeavor to employ the teachings of divine wisdom in our search for meaning. Self-actualization is the awakening of energies and capacities that lie within us. So what does that say about our current condition? The Buddha, as Pierre mentioned, declared that he was awake, which presumably means most of us are sleepwalking through some form of somnambulistic existence. Krishna makes the statement, among thousands of mortals, a single one perhaps strives for perfection. And amongst those so striving, perhaps a single one knows me as I am. And Thoreau put the ratio at 1 in 10,000 for what he called a real man. By these lofty standards, one must assume that there is a great deal of awakening possible for all of us. From the standpoint of self-actualization, sleep here means thoughtless, autonomic, reactionary, and habitual living. The gradual process of shaking off sleep was called by the ancients individuation. It is important to reflect on the etymology of the term individual. In or not, dividus, divided, not divided. Put another way, whole. To become whole would be to awaken to the infinite possibilities and potentials that lie within human nature. In Theosophical philosophy, we distinguish between the individual man and the personal man. The individual is the immortal man. The personal is the mortal man. Persona comes from the Greek word mask. Our personality is something we wear for the length of time of an incarnation. The immortal individuality overbroods the personal man. The sensation or feeling that someone or something is watching over us is a universal human experience, which has led many to the unphilosophical idea of some ultimate personal God whose first priority is me. Perhaps the first step in the process of individuation is the acknowledgement that deep down we really don't know who or what we are. It is a profound mystery worthy of pursuing. The self you see in the mirror as a child is not the self you see in old age. And that is only the body looking back at us in the mirror. What about the myriad allegiances, loyalties, and attitudes that have changed within a single lifetime? Ironically, individuation requires a Socratic realization of ignorance. Put positively, it is the appreciation of our own unlimited potential and the appreciation for the mystery of it. Despite what society says, despite one's education, one's religion, despite the prevailing science of the times, I really don't know where my consciousness comes from. I do not know the source of my being. I do not know what the limits of my potential are. Everything I have learned or been told, including in theosophical circles, are assumptions or unproven assertions. Let us call them working hypotheses. This is the Socratic starting point, the point where we cast off double ignorance, assuming we know when we really don't. We need a fresh start. The second step, perhaps, is to start doing some thinking of one's own. Individuation requires a supreme leap of faith in oneself. I don't know, but I want to know, and I can know. I will trust my best judgment from this point forward. I accept no authority greater than the integrity of my own mind, to use Emerson's words. Ultimately, what this means is standing on one's own 2 feet. It is trusting your capacity to sift and search for truth and reality. Every proposition, every assumption must come before the crucible of one's own inquiry. This does not mean one must abandon one's devotion and respect for spiritual teachers and the best amongst us. Not at all. What it means is we acknowledge that the divine light is within us too, shining in our heart and in our mind, however dimly it might seem. The more we subject every idea that comes before us to the courtroom of our best judgment, the more we gain trust that what we need to live well is within us and not without us. Hence, the more we individuate. Never is this done with snap judgments and first opinions. Honest examination is a little bit like writing a letter to a distant friend and awaiting patiently for an answer in the mail. We submit our questions and concerns to the self within. We stay with it. We come back again and again to consider the question, contemplate the problem. And should we persist in the effort, the answer and judgment will come if our motive is clean. This is precisely when the teachings of our preceptors and the karma of our lives, and the fellowship of our companions speaks the most loudly to us. It is our own light shining back to us in a myriad mysterious ways. We are actively receptive to the light within. Who is to say otherwise? Could it be that our inner voice is communicating with us in the form of a loving child, a warm gesture from a friend, or a clever phrase in a comic strip? It is the recognition of wisdom, whenever and however it occurs, that is sublime. It is evidence of our own connection to the voice of the silence. To individuate is to carry on a long dialogue with oneself. It has to do with building an inner life, a thoughtful life, a curious life, and in the end to become awake to the infinite possibilities to live, love, and learn that so many allow to pass them by. Building an inner life, a life not bound by space and time, a life that is immortal, a feeling of life that is both extremely ancient and ever new, is the reason the teachings of Theosophy are given to us. As we connect one idea to the next, as we discover the great analogical nature of the universe, as we sense the great chain of being of which everyone is part, we begin to realize that solitude and unity are two halves of the same coin. We are not alone. We are not separate. The power of the universe and the prospects of growth lie within for the taking. In the words of the voice of the silence, all is impermanent in man, except the pure, bright essence of Alaya. Man is its crystal ray, a beam of light immaculate within, a form of clay material upon the lower surface. That beam is thy life guide, and thy true self, the watcher and silent thinker, the victim of the lower self. A spiritual life is a rich inner life, and it must be built little by little, brick by brick. This is what self-actualization is about. Our outer life is important, to be sure, but it is the field of limitation. Limitation is important because it provides a field to test our ideas, to experiment. Gandhi called it his experiments with truth. But our inner life is unlimited. Our inner life is where immortality lies, vision lies, inspiration lies, and a sanctuary from the changes and turmoils of the world. Helen Keller, who could neither see nor hear, gave voice to the spirit of this scope of the inner life when she said, "Literature is my utopia. Here I am not disenfranchised. No barrier of the senses shuts me out from the sweet, gracious discourses of my book friends. They talk to me without embarrassment or awkwardness." Paradoxically, the more we set aside what is personal and explore the impersonal, the more we individuate. What is truly within lies beyond the world of personal concerns and likes and dislikes. The more interested we become in the stories of others and in the story of mankind, the more we individuate. We expand the circle of selfhood, another revolution. Individuation and therefore self-actualization is both centrifugal and centripetal in nature. They are both an inner and an outer effort which is required. It is the breathing of the soul, in a manner of speaking. With reflection, meditation, contemplation, and questions, we establish a beachhead of an inner life from which a peninsula can grow and eventually become a continent of internal reality, every bit as real as the world of the senses we feel to us now. But first, we must gain some measure of critical distance from our own personal life. Pierre is going to read this passage from the Secret Doctrine for us.
Intimately, or rather indissolubly connected with karma, then, is the law of rebirth or of the reincarnation of the same spiritual individuality in a long, almost interminable series of personalities. The latter are like the various costumes and characters played by the same actor, with each of which that actor identifies himself and is identified by the public for the space of a few hours. The inner or real man who personates those characters knows the whole time that he is Hamlet for the brief space of a few acts, which represent, however, on the plane of human illusion, the whole life of Hamlet. And he knows that he was, the night before, King Lear, the transformation in his turn of the Othello of a still earlier preceding night. But the outer visible character is supposed to be ignorant of the fact. In actual life, that ignorance is, unfortunately, but too real. Nevertheless, the permanent individuality is fully aware of the fact, though through the atrophy of the spiritual eye in the physical body, that knowledge is unable to impress itself on the consciousness of the false personality.
Individuation has to do with becoming the universal man. The core theosophical premise is that the whole range of human nature is within us. There is nothing in the world of humanity that is entirely foreign to us. This becomes even more logical when we consider the possibility of reincarnation and of thousands of lifetimes as a working hypothesis. To the degree that we connect with our fellow man is the degree to which we erode our separateness. And as the separateness fades away, we become more whole again. And as Maslow points out, more uniquely ourselves and spontaneous. You might say more comfortable in our own skin. This is why Maslow emphasized role flexibility as one of the traits of the self-actualizing man. One can assume any role: mother, father, sister, brother, son, daughter, friend, associate, co-worker, and be free from over-identifying with any one of them. We are not any particular role. We are all the roles we need to perform our svadharma, our appointed responsibilities. Individuation assumes an honest self-appraisal. Where are we getting stuck? What attitudes that govern our lives have gone unquestioned? What is causing us pain? What is holding us back? How difficult are we making life for others? When we begin to question our lives this way, we run up against an inconvenient truth. The path to self-actualization has an enemy at the gate, and that enemy is oneself. It is the old sense of self, our ill-chosen attitudes, the unquestioned assumptions, and the litany of uninvited feelings that are the karma of past thoughts and deeds. There is an unsatisfactory self that is very much alive within us too. We have given life to it, filled it with thought and emotion, and assumed it to be real. And it won't go away without a fight. This is the rude truth that needs to be added to our self-actualization quest. Plato's allegory of the cave represents this idea beautifully. Most of us are chained to the floor and staring at the shadows on the wall, captivated by all the things temporal. To individuate, we must break these chains and seek the source of light behind the shadows. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "Come ye out and be ye separate." Break the shackles that limit our vision in the cave. The art of self-actualization has no formula or method any more than all knots are untied exactly the same way. The steps and stages of building an inner life must be discovered, which is one of the great joys of the process, we are told by Maslow and others. These are known as peak experiences, epiphanies of discovery and experimentation. The Bhagavad Gita describes the path of individuation in the symbolism of a war between oneself and oneself. And no struggle is sustainable without enthusiasm. This is where the second of our ideas in this series comes into play, inspiration. The inspired life is a life of self-chosen challenges. To achieve the impossible, attempt the absurd, says Unamuno, the great Spanish philosopher of old. Emerson said that nothing great was ever achieved in human life without enthusiasm. Magic Johnson, the great basketball player, would practice outside in the bitter cold of Michigan's winter. Day after day in his youth, he would pretend he was playing against his basketball idols. Again and again, he would picture himself shooting and scoring the winning shot at the end of the game over and over again, despite his mother's protestations to come in out of the weather. Inspiration is the motor power of self-actualization and individuation. But how do we foster inspiration? How do we stoke those fires until they become a blaze of accomplishments? Most people do not attempt things that are difficult because they are afraid to discover that they are not up to the task and might fail. The problem arises from a short-circuited view of the process. In a culture dominated by the notion of one life to live, focused on quick results, diet pills, and the absurd notion of God-given talent, far too many are afraid to try something difficult. Theosophy teaches that everything in nature grows incrementally and slowly over time. Mother Nature's mantra is little by little. The giant sequoia trees of the Sierras reach their massive heights little by little, starting from a seed no larger than the fingernail on your little pinky. Languages are learned, a word and a phrase at a time. Instruments are learned, a note or a chord or a song at a time. The self-actualizing man appreciates the process, respects the integrity of the cycle. So what if you can't play tennis like Serena or Roger? You can still enjoy the process of learning and improving. So what if you cannot sing like Celine Dion or Bocelli? Does that mean you cannot enjoy the learning and participating in singing? If you're born in Cuba, you enjoy dancing, whether you're good at it or not. It is rooted in the culture. This is the attitude of the self-actualizing man. You grow at nature's pace and no faster. The challenge is to persist in the endeavor, which requires inspiration. And this leads us to the third idea we must attempt to explore in this lecture series, the idea of illusion. Theosophically, life as we conventionally know it is Maya, the arena of illusion, the domain of manifestation. This is an idea that is widely misunderstood. The erroneous assumption is this: if the world be illusory, then it cannot be important. Well, it's important enough for those who live within those boundaries and experience its pleasures and pains. It is important in degree and within a context. What makes it illusory is its changing nature. Nothing stays the same, not even for a moment. The forces of creation and destruction are perpetually at work. According to Gandhi, human nature is such that we must either sink or soar. How this pertains to the art of self-actualization is profound. The expression of potential lies at the heart of individuation and self-actualization. The play is the thing, according to Shakespeare. The process of creation is more important than the thing created. Why? Because it is part of a process of unfoldment of the infinite reservoirs of the potentials within the human being. It would be a crying shame if Leonardo da Vinci created only the Mona Lisa, or Van Gogh was satisfied with the Starry Night, or Maya Angelou put down her pen after writing "And Still I Rise." The self-actualizing man is one who enjoys creativity itself. It is not tricked into forming a sense of self around the products of creation. The great songwriter Burt Bacharach, who passed away just a few months back, found it difficult to listen to old recordings of his songs because he heard so many things he would like to improve upon now. Great gardens, for example, are built by those who tend them with an eye to their imperfections. The garden can't be frozen in time. It must evolve through the seasons. Incremental improvements is the way of the gardener. Striking the right attitude concerning illusion and Maya is critical to self-actualization. Self-actualization is the pursuit of excellence in being human. Every free thinker should become a student of human excellences, a collector of great moments and achievements, both one's own and of others. Why not draw your own portrait of the ideal man or woman? It is healthy to draw and redraw the map of selfhood. We gravitate towards the objects of our thoughts. John Milton wrote, "The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven." So let me finish my part of the proceedings here by turning over the floor to one very experienced on the path of self-actualization and building an inner life, Mr. Henry David Thoreau. Speaking of the inner life, he says, "We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture or to carve a statue, and so to make a few objects beautiful. But it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which morally we can do. To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of the arts. Every man is tasked to make his life, even in its details, worthy of the contemplation of his most elevated and critical hour." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry.